what's actually the hardest part about learning a language?
The habits and like actually doing it.
Yes, it's the habits, it's the motivation for most people. There's probably 10%, 5% of the population. They're so intrinsically motivated. They don't need Duolingo. They don't need AI. You can give them a textbook and they will succeed at learning the language. But most of us, it's like, by the way, same with gym or fitness. Most of us, we need motivation, and that's the ultimate bottleneck. And from day one, we focused on motivation and in particular retention. So how many people come back the next day? And what we've built at Duolingo is this motivation engine, and we've built this product development process that we've published on many places, which is like very very experiment driven. So we just run way more experiments than any of our competitors, and that's why we were able to increase our retention by a lot. And we're by far the highest retaining education product in the market in our category.
Hi everyone, welcome to Founders in Arms podcast with me, Immad, Akhund, co-founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj Suri, co-founder of Lima and Tribe. And today we have with us Severin Hacker, co-founder and CTO of Duolingo, one of my favorite apps. I'm very inspired by what you guys build at Duolingo. It's one of the best consumer apps, I think, ever to be built. Welcome to the show, Severin.
Thank you for having me.
So, Severin, I've been actually following you guys for a while, and I've been, listening to a bunch of your podcasts and inspired by what you've built. It's so hard to build a great consumer app that really keeps people engaged. What are you most proud of? When you look at like Duolingo in over the last decade, like what makes you most proud of your journey?
Yeah, so probably the number one thing I'm most proud of is that we're still true to our mission. So our mission that we started with, and still the current mission, is to provide the best education and make it universally available. So it's very important for us that you can learn a language, or now we added math and music, that you can learn things on Duolingo without a credit card. And this is still true to this day. And for a long time, we didn't know how to, find a viable business model that is aligned with this mission. But eventually, we were able to do this. And today, it's also a great business, but it's a great business that is true to its original mission. And that's
Yeah.
probably the number one thing I'm most proud of. And that's, by the way, also why I'm still with Duolingo, because I'm connecting with this mission.
I was listening to that. I mean, it's like something like 8% of users pay and the rest is free, right? Something like that is like, and it's remarkable. I mean, everyone, like 92% of people benefit from 8% of people paying. That's a fantastic model.
It is incredible. I don't know if these are the current numbers, but it is incredible that education is, especially English learning, in a lot of countries is the way to go up in social mobility. So in a country like Brazil, uh, learning English really enables you to study abroad, get a higher paying job, etc., etc. So if you charge a high price for that, then you actually exclude a lot of people and you remove that opportunity. And I think that's why it's super important.
I believe a big part of Duolingo was kind of connecting learners together so they can learn from each other. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you feel like AI is now like the main way that'll be done? Like you can just talk to an AI that is fluent in English and you can kind of, it can correct you and like it be very natural. Is that how it's going to be?
So it's actually interesting. So I think the main way people use Duolingo is with kind of AI technology first software approach. Is not directly connecting with other people. We do have social features, but more like a leaderboard or
No.
stuff like that. Um, but the way we see AI is it's gonna completely change pretty much everything. So how we work, how we learn, and how do we entertain ourselves. The way we use AI at Duolingo is three things. Number one is we use AI to generate our content, and that's where we've seen the biggest gains so far. And this actually has started 2 years ago with GPT-4. We've been able to basically generate all of our content with AI. So that's been super big. Number two is how can I use AI to build new features that we previously couldn't build, right? So for us, we have this feature called video call with Lily. So Lily is one of our characters. She's the one with the purple hair. And with this feature, you can actually talk to her, and it's more like a friend. So she's not your English tutor or French tutor. She wants to become your friend, and she remembers stuff. Like your hobbies. For example, for me, she knows that I like cooking. She knows where I live, and she has this conversation with you. And there's also a review later where you can see like, hey, what could I have said better, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the second way we use AI. And the third way we use AI is just to kind of get productivity improvements. So using Cursor for software engineers and stuff like that.
And on the content generation side, like how much did that accelerate content generation? Was it like kind of replacing it, or was it a massive accelerant?
Massive accelerant. I mean, we just released 148 new courses,
Mhm.
and it took us only 1 year to do this. For comparison, the previous 100 plus courses took us 12 years.
Wow.
So
Wow.
the speed up is 10x,
10x.
at
Yeah.
least 10x. Yeah.
Mhm.
And is that partly how you've got out of just kind of language learning, because it's now so much easier to create courses in math and all these other subjects?
Yeah. So actually, the models are not yet as good at math.
Mhm.
They're getting better. So actually, the newest reasoning models, from Claude 3.7, for example, they're actually quite good at math, and we're doing that now. So we're creating the math curriculum and the math content with AI, and hope to see the same gains. But math is a little bit harder for LLMs. One thing that is really good about language learning is these LLMs are really, really good at languages. In fact, that's probably the one thing they're best at.
Yeah.
I was seeing, an article or something that Apple is releasing like language translation in AirPods. I don't know if you've seen this, but like, and then I guess someone was talking to someone who was saying like, well, does that mean language learning is obsolete because now you'll have real time in-ear translation? But from what I've seen from Lewis's podcast and yours is like people learn language as a hobby. It's like almost like chess or something like that. It's like people are trying to challenge their mind. Is that right?
100%. So if you ask our users, what would you do if Duolingo went away? Like, you ask them, and they say, most of them in countries like the US, it depends a little bit on the country and the use case, but in the US, most of them say, oh, I would spend more time on Instagram or TikTok. They never mention one of our competitors. So to them, Duolingo is is a healthy snack. So it's like,
Mhm.
they have 5 minutes now. I can spend it on Instagram or I can spend it on TikTok, but I can also spend it on Duolingo. And there's the side effect of me learning a language. So these are the hyper casual users, and to them, yeah, you know, they wouldn't use the AirPod, probably.
When you started Duolingo, I think most people would have said consumer is too hard and education is too hard. Or like not even hard, like maybe the market sizes aren't big enough, or it's hard to make a big company here. Like, A, what do you think they got wrong? And B, what advice would you give other founders that like also had like similar things about consumer and these spaces?
Ooh, yeah. So first of all, I would agree.
Yeah, definitely if you're thinking of a competitor.
I would agree. Consumer is very hard. Education is even harder, I would say. It is one of these weird things with education. It's like, in theory, it's this massive market. It's like health or healthcare. It's like a massive market, but it's very unattractive because it's super fragmented, and it's super highly regulated. So there's like only pockets that you can actually get into as a private company. Um,
Mhm.
so I started angel investing in 2016, and my one rule is I do not invest in education. It's like I invest in all sorts of other stuff like consumer, B2B, etc., but not education. It's just super hard. But I would say the in terms of language learning, I think the one thing we got right, and we've been sharing this for the last 6, 7, 8 years publicly, and somehow nobody's well, maybe it's too late to kind of adopt this technique. Is what's actually the hardest part about learning a language?
The habits and like actually doing it.
Yes, it's the habits, it's the motivation. For most people, there's probably 10%, 5% of the population. They're so intrinsically motivated. They don't need Duolingo. They don't need AI. They don't. You can give them a textbook and they will succeed at learning the language. And for them, like it doesn't matter what. But most of us, it's like, by the way, same with gym or fitness. Most of us, we need motivation, and
Hmm.
and that's the ultimate bottleneck. And and from day one, we focused on motivation and in particular retention.
Hmm.
So how many people come back the next day? And what we've built at Duolingo is this motivation engine, and we've built this product development process that we've published on many places, uh, which is like very very experiment driven. So we just run way more experiments
Hmm.
than any of our competitors, and that's why we were able to increase our retention by a lot, and we're by far the highest retaining education product in the market in our category. Um, so that's number one thing. So focus on the right metric, like what actually matters
Hmm.
for learning a language. That's motivation. And then number two is the method of doing this is we internally call it now the green machine, but it's running a ton of experiments and try to optimize these metrics.
Hmm. What was like the most surprising experiment where you were like, wow, I can't believe that actually made such a big difference?
There's not a single experiment, but one thing is like people say like when people talk about Duolingo, they use this like, hey, how long is your Duolingo streak?
Hmm.
Right, so it's one of our core game mechanics, right?
Yeah.
And and then it's like, oh, you know what? I'll just gonna make a Duolingo for X, so for something else. Let's say Duolingo for running or whatever, and I'm gonna copy the streak mechanic, and then I'm
Hmm.
gonna have the same retention as Duolingo. But the what they miss is that like a very simple streak mechanic is just a an integer in your database, right? And it will give you some retention benefits. But the true value of the Duolingo streak comes from the hundreds, and we've probably run hundreds, if not thousands, experiments on the exact streak mechanic. Like how
Hmm.
do you lose it? How do you regain it? How do you promote it, etc., etc. And that's where you see, maybe like the first version gets you like like 10% of the gains.
Hmm.
But then all the other experiments together give you, 100%.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Uh, you have such a engineering mind about your I mean, obviously you're the CTO, but it's interesting that you guys came from such an academic background. Like, it's not an obvious background to like get to building a consumer app. Like, yeah, like how did that transition happen? Like, did you think you'd always do a startup? Was this like just something you kind of fell into? Like, what was the history there?
Yeah. So for me, it's actually, I actually accidentally got into academia,
Hmm.
and not vice versa. So when growing up in Switzerland, I had two dreams. One was to study in the US once, and the other one was to start a company at some point in my life.
Hmm.
Um, and then ended up doing both at Carnegie Mellon. So that's where I met Louis, and we started the company there. Um, and the the belief. So Louis had two prior exits before Duolingo, and the belief of our investors, our first investors, was Unisquare Ventures, which we know that's how we originally met Immad. They believe that, oh yeah, these two academics, they don't really know how to run a company, and it's okay. They're gonna sell to Google, and we're gonna get our money back and a nice return.
Yeah.
Um, or they believe that, oh yeah, this is a Louis in this in case, great founder. This is a bad idea, but this gives us the chance to invest in his next company. So that's
Call
that's kind of
option.
like
Yeah.
yeah. But then yeah, academia and startup life is quite different. Just the whole value system, the incentive structure is very different.
Was there some things that you did learn in academia that you use here? I mean, obviously you're in a educational kind of space, which has similarities, right?
I would say One thing I learned during my PhD is, I actually finished it. I wrote the thesis and all that, just like working by myself
Hmm.
uh, on a project for a long time. That discipline is something I think that is useful across domains. Um, but then I think there's a lot of stuff that you have to unlearn from academia.
Yeah.
So, for example, in academia, the main it depends on the discipline, but in computer science, it's kind of like there's a premium on novelty. Like, this is a new idea. This is
Mm.
actually original, or you combine a bunch of ideas into something new. Um, whether it's and there's no like market feedback, right? So then there's like the charge is other people, so other academics, and it becomes actually it's a much more I would say, who do you know, and there's like these fads, and for example, like neural networks were completely out of fashion when I was studying. They're like 2012. Like, if you were working on neural networks, you were kind of like an outcast. Eventually, that was the right thing to do, right? But at the time, it was like not cool, and
Hmm.
you wouldn't get a lot of citations, you wouldn't maybe get become a professor, et cetera, et cetera. And then that completely changed.
Hmm.
So there's no this direct market feedback, which is what you see in startups.
Severin, I interview a lot. Building a group chat app right now. Interview people a lot. I interview like engineers and designers for like a consumer app, and I often ask them like, what is their favorite app, right? And the people who mentioned Duolingo, there are a few. Those people like go higher on my list, because like I think the thought that you put into the app, for everything, like the streaks you mentioned, like the owl, getting sadder over time if you're not like, doing your lesson for the day, is really intricate compared to other consumer apps. And so I'm just curious, what kind of emphasis do you guys place on design and these user experience? I mean, you come from an engineering background, but there's so much emphasis on design and user experience in your company. Like, how do you build that into your culture?
Yeah. So the difference between a good app and a great app is the details, is the polish, and Luis in particular, he is amazing at this. So Luis is still in every single product review. So in terms of founder mode, that's his version of founder mode. He still
Hmm.
does every single product review, every single change that goes into the app, he reviews. He
Hmm.
reviews the design and all that.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that sends a signal to the organization that this organization cares about details, because
Hmm.
the CEO cares about the details,
Hmm.
and then everybody in the company cares about it. And
Hmm.
then, yes, we have a very large design team. It's actually the second largest organization or function within Duolingo. Largest is engineering, second largest is design, and third is product or product
Hmm.
management.
Hmm.
So I think this is come from the top. Yeah.
Does that not slow down these A/B tests? If like if you want to run an A/B test, but you got to go through kind of Lewis and product review, does that, or like just have a design taste for it?
You would think so, but it's I think it's important to have this one centralized component, because afterward, like any team can. So we're organized by metrics. So then we have a monetization area, we have a growth area, and they try to optimize different metrics. But we're not like, okay, you own this screen and you own that screen. No, anyone in any area can work on any screen. So I can go in, if I'm if I'm in growth, I can go in and change the streak mechanic, or I can run an experiment to do that. But I can also do it if I'm in monetization. So it's not like that there's a lot of parallelism coming from
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
And we run hundreds of experiments concurrently. So if we open the app, we all see different versions of it. But
Hmm.
yes, there's a little overhead in this centralized product review, but it's I think ultimately, again, a trade-off, like latency, or I guess that's the word I use for this. Latency, like how quickly do you get something out, versus consistency. How consistent is the experience? Does it feel like one product? Does it feel there's polish and all that?
Yeah, having a cohesive vision and bringing everything back to a central thing that makes sense, I think, is super important, right, for the overall user experience. Um, You mentioned something. Oh, you mentioned growth right there. In the beginning, when you were getting to product market fit, like a lot of VCs now don't invest in consumer apps because they're like, I'll invest after you get product market fit. I don't want to take that product market fit risk because it's so risky for consumer apps, right? And this has changed a lot in the last 10 years. Speaking of being out of fashion, right? Consumer is pretty much out of fashion these days. Um, and how did you get to that initial product market fit? Like, as a consumer app, how did you, get there? I mean, you put out an app out there, probably, it's hard to get discovered. So, where did you get that from?
Yeah, so there's pros and cons of being in consumer. One of the pros is, you can build for yourself, your
Hmm.
own customer, right? If you're
Hmm.
building Workday, I don't know, you're probably not a massive organization, so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you can build for yourself. That's number one thing. That's like, and everybody from day one, everybody we use the product all the time.
Mhm.
So that's one thing, and then we, very early on, what we did is a lot of user testing, but in
Mhm.
person. Like this was back at CMU, we would ask strangers to come to our office and test the app, and
Mhm.
we got a lot of feedback from that. And then the other good thing we had was we had a private beta at the very beginning, and we got a lot of interest in that. It was a good idea. We got some PR. So even from day one, we had couple 100,000 DAUs
Mhm.
because of the momentum we built before we actually launched the thing. But then I think that the actual mistake, and why people don't invest in consumer is, in consumer you can fake growth,
Mm.
you can buy growth, you can
Mm.
acquire users, and most, uh, if you're not sophisticated and looking, if you don't look at the right metrics, um, you can be misled by this growth. And
Do
I
you
think that
invest in consumer? You said you don't invest in education, but you do.
I do invest in consumer as long as
So
it's
what
education. And
what are the metrics you look at, like when you look at a consumer company?
so the ultimate metrics, what matters is retention.
Hmm.
Okay, that's, you can fake retention, and then the retention is basically product quality. If you build a great product, people will come back the next day. It
Like how
depends a
many
little bit on the.
months of retention data does like someone need before you think it's like, oh, that's like real versus like, just like an initial kind of thing?
Yeah, so you actually want to see, so the absolute numbers matter, like what's the retention curve, and then the other thing that you want to look at is the cohorts. So do newer cohorts retain better, because that tells you how good is this team at improving retention. So that basically tells you like how good is the talent, how good is the team,
Mhm.
and if both of them are true, or good, then then it's interesting.
Do you ever worry when you invest in a consumer app that like, oh, it'll be really hard for them to get a Series A or a Series B? Like there isn't like as much like follow-on capital. Like, are you saying, do you think more about like, oh, can this be profitable quickly, or like, or are you still kind of going for like a home run and you're willing to kind of take the risk?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's I'm not a great investor. First of all,
Very
I
candid.
I think I'm a okay investor. You're probably much much better, but the way I looked at it is like, where's my alpha?
Hmm.
And for consumer companies, I know what to look at, and that's where I have my alpha, um, which metrics matter, etc. Uh, the other thing that is hard about consumer is, well, first of all, you have, if you look at the largest tech companies, they're actually, Google and Facebook, they are consumer, or Google and Meta, they are consumer, and they have this kill zone around them, right? And in the past,
Hmm.
they would acquire these companies that are, the Instagrams of the world or the YouTubes of the world. But now, because of antitrust, that exit route is kind of blocked. I think that's why a lot of VCs don't invest, because like, Duolingo is the exception. In fact, if you look at, consumer, or let's say even just consumer AI, and there's probably ways of putting us into the consumer AI camp. Um, we're probably one of the largest in terms of revenue directly coming from AI features.
Mm.
OpenAI is number one, and then we might be top 5 or so. But the other thing you see in consumer is the winner take all effects are just way stronger. So, what's the second largest search engine?
Bing, I
Bing,
guess.
probably,
But that's
Very
also
small.
owned by
Yeah.
a huge company.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
Google might be at some point. OpenAI and
Right. So
I think that's a really good point about like the kill zone of these big companies. I mean, and they've got really good at copying things as well, right? Like there's one of the reasons I think Snapchat has not grown that much is because like Meta just like ripped off every single feature they ever had, and it's like fully incorporated into Instagram and WhatsApp and everything.
Yeah, and in the past they would probably try to acquire. I'm sure that I guess that they did, but now I think the path is because antitrust. You just copy the feature, and that's the successful way. But yeah, so the second largest search engine is probably 10 times smaller than Google, and you see the same with Duolingo. We're probably 10 times or even bigger than number 2, versus in B2B. I don't know. What's your I know in your space, number 2 and number 1 are maybe 2x versus 1x.
Yeah,
something
2x,
like that.
yeah, probably.
Yeah, you just have much less of a kind of network effect and mode. It's really interesting. This reminds me of ad tech as well, which is the same issue. Like in my last company, we did a bunch of innovations in like we had an ad network briefly, and we were like one of the first to do like one of these big interstitial ads with like a icon, a button that was green, and like we tested all this stuff, and yeah, that advantage lasted like a year, and like Google copied it, Meta copied it, and it's just like that. When they enter a space in ad tech, it's like there's no way to like fight against it, and so that kill zone, as you say, exists in like ad tech and consumer because of like those two companies, especially. But yeah, it's definitely not true in B2B.
I have a different view on this a little bit. Like, I think like the big companies getting into a space doesn't necessarily kill it, but actually can accelerate growth in some ways. Like, at my last company, like Google tried to like basically clone like a voice AI for drive-throughs, and they were so slow at executing, but they raised like the profile of the space by getting into it, and actually helped helped us, right? And because it was like, oh, Google's doing this, it legitimizes the space. So like let's find a company that's faster than Google that still has a good product. So that was a B2B case, but like
Yeah. I think it might be the difference is like, is there some advantage that they're bringing to bear beyond just copying? Where like if they already have a network effect and they bring that advantage to bear, that like makes
Yeah.
it much harder. I mean, like Microsoft Teams did destroy Slack, and they were bringing this kind of advantage of like already having this kind of user base they could like sell into.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between destroy and like slow the growth down, right? Like, so Slack
Sure.
is still, like it probably slowed the growth because it forced it to sell, but
Yeah.
like it didn't.
And
kill
like
it,
even
right? Yeah.
Snapchat is like a 10 billion plus dollar company, so we should not be like mean about
Yeah.
it. Like
Yeah.
you can
13
definitely
billion, yeah.
survive alongside them.
Severin, I had a question about just like overall your we actually were talking about you and Louis recently, because I help high skilled immigrants come to the U.S. and work with a bunch of national immigration activists who are trying to bring in skilled immigrants to the U.S. And you're like become a poster child, you and Louis for this story. You're originally Swiss, right? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you guys came. What do you think of the journey coming to the U.S. and starting a company? We're all immigrant founders here. But is that something that you also look for when you invest for that type of background? Do you think it gave you some advantage, or what do you think of the overall journey?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm super grateful that I could move to the US. And I feel like I had this unfair advantage that I immensely benefited from the Swiss public school system, and I did my undergrad in Switzerland as well, and then that allowed me to go to the US for grad school. And then I benefited from the US ecosystem around startups. By the way, Duolingo was actually started in Pittsburgh and not in Silicon Valley, and we're still headquartered in Pittsburgh. That's a whole another story. I do believe there's something about immigrants and founders, which is uh, uh, the overlap is probably this kind of like pragmatic problem solving that you need to have as an immigrant. As like, how do you get a social security card? How do you make friends? I moved to the U.S. knowing no one, like zero people, and a lot of that I think transfers to startups as well. The U.S. is also just. I was just at a mini conference in Germany last weekend, and there's still this massive attraction for like the smartest and most ambitious people to go to Silicon Valley,
Mhm.
and it's a huge advantage. In fact,
Mm.
I think if the single best thing the US could do to help the European startup ecosystem is to make it harder for people like me to move to the US.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I left London in 2006, there was literally it was 100% of the good entrepreneurs left London into the US, and it was just like literally there was like a entrepreneur group that I was part of, and that was just the path. Like the group disappeared because more than 50% of the people left for the US. So yeah, it would definitely help.
If you had stayed, if you had stayed, the counterfactual is if you had stayed, you probably would have tried to not only build your company there, but also try to make the ecosystem
better. Yeah,
And
100%.
because we all leave, there's no pressure on making the ecosystem better.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess but we don't necessarily feel that loyalty, right? Like, I think the other aspect, which I guess is kind of buried in your comment, is it just takes like an unusual amount of risk to leave a country, right? Like the default path for you would have been like get a great job in Switzerland. Like it's not like you would have been successful there, but you took this big leap, and that's like massively risk taking, and it just aligns up with a similar kind of mindset that like startups take.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, especially if it's different language, different culture. Yeah.
But Severin, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for joining, Severin.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Please leave us a review on whatever channel you're listening on. Makes a big difference to the algorithm and to the success of the show. And see you all next week.